The more he listened, the easier it felt to trust her. As he lay his head on his pillow that night, drifting off to her dulcet tones, he realized that he too was beginning to trust this woman he had never met. By Friday morning, Dominic's preliminary report was ready. It was not the report Bingham and Blaine expected. He had written it with the care of a man who knew every sentence might one day be examined by lawyers, regulators, journalists, and frightened families looking for proof that someone had finally taken them seriously. There was no drama in it, no moralizing, no accusation he could not support. Only facts, adverse event reports, regulatory data, repeated symptom patterns, patient testimonies, public reviews, medical histories shared openly by those desperate to be believed, accounts from support groups, interviews, published narratives, and professional commentaries. The conclusion was clear. The complaints were credible. The pattern was consistent. The harm was real. Dominic's recommendations were equally clear. An immediate review of the safety profile, updated patient information leaflets, an independent investigation, direct engagement with patient advocates, and urgent guidance for prescribers on tolerance, dependence, withdrawal, careful prescribing, and safe tapering. He placed one printed copy in a slim black folder and carried it himself to the boardroom. The room was waiting for him. 12 people sat around the long walnut table, each with a glass of chilled mineral water, a silver pen, and an expression arranged somewhere between impatience and expectation. Michael Norris was seated beside the chief executive, his face unusually still. Dominic connected his laptop, opened the report, and began. For 27 minutes, no one interrupted him. He spoke calmly. He showed the timeline of complaints. He explained the symptom clusters. He referenced the adverse event reports, the patient accounts, the consistency across countries, and the consequences of dismissing withdrawal reactions as relapse, anxiety, hysteria, or unrelated illness. He did not mention Kara at first. He did not have to. Her work ran through the evidence like a thread of light. When he finished, the boardroom was silent. Not thoughtful, not moved. Silent in the way a room becomes. Silent when it is deciding how best to close around a threat. The chief executive leaned back in his chair. "Dr. Pemberton," he said slowly, "perhaps you have misunderstood why you were brought here." Dominic looked around the table. 12 faces stared back at him, polished, powerful, unmoved. "I was brought here to assess the patient narrative," he replied. "That is what I have done." "You were brought here," Michael Norris said sharply, "to manage it." Dominic did not answer immediately. Outside the glass walls of the boardroom, the city glittered beneath a pale morning sky. Inside, there was walnut paneling, untouched pastries, folded linen napkins, and people discussing human suffering as though it were an inconvenience on a spreadsheet. "The narrative cannot be managed if the underlying problem is ignored," Dominic said. The chief executive's mouth tightened. "Navixidone is one of the most profitable products in our portfolio. It is prescribed internationally. Millions rely on it. And many are being harmed by it," Dominic said quietly. A murmur travelled around the table. The legal director opened the folder and tapped one manicured finger against the page. You are recommending that we engage with Kara Minelli. Yes, she has caused considerable reputational damage. She has documented patient experience. She is an activist. She is a witness. Michael gave a short, humorless laugh. She is a problem. No, Dominic said, more firmly now. She is a warning. The room fell still. Something shifted in the air. Dominic felt it immediately, the precise moment when he stopped being their expert and became their obstacle. The chief executive closed the folder. We are not changing the patient leaflet. We are not issuing warnings that create panic. We are not inviting scrutiny where none is required. And we are certainly not validating individuals who have built platforms out of fear. Dominic felt his jaw tighten. These people are not inventing their suffering. That is not your concern. It is now. Michael leaned forward. Dominic, don't get sentimental. You were hired to protect the company. I was hired to tell you what I found, and now we are telling you what we need. Dominic looked at the report lying on the table between them. For years he had worked in rooms like this. He knew the language, risk management, brand protection, reputational exposure, commercial sensitivity, containment strategy. But now, behind every polished phrase, he heard Kara's voice. He heard the woman on the recording whisper, I don't know how much longer I can do this. He heard Kara answer, steady and gentle, just this minute. Stay with me for just this minute. He heard the father in Toronto, the retired teacher in Manchester, the musician who could no longer bear music, the nurse who recognized the pattern only after it happened to her. He looked back at the executives. I cannot do what you are asking me to do. Michael's expression hardened. You may want to think very carefully before saying anything further. I have thought carefully. Then think again. I have read the reports, Dominic said. I have listened to the patients. I have seen enough. The chief executive's voice dropped. You signed a confidentiality agreement? I signed an agreement to protect legitimate company information, Dominic replied, not to help conceal harm. No one spoke. Dominic reached for the black folder and closed it slowly. It was the only printed copy he had brought into the room. The full report, with supporting material, remained elsewhere, carefully stored, carefully protected, no longer dependent on Bingham and Blaine's goodwill. He stood and buttoned his jacket. Michael stared at him. What exactly do you think you're doing? Dominic picked up the folder. What I should have done much sooner in my career. The chief executive's eyes narrowed. You are making a very serious mistake. Dominic paused at the door. For the first time since entering Bingham and Blaine's headquarters, he felt no need to manage the room. You asked me to find the truth, he said. I found it. What you do with it is up to you. Then he turned back, his hand resting on the door handle. But what I do with it, he added, is up to me. He left the boardroom without looking back. Outside, Mrs. Bellamy was at her desk, pretending not to have noticed the tension in the hallway. Dominic stopped in front of her. Mrs. Bellamy, he said quietly, would you mind making a copy of my calendar for the past week and forwarding it to my personal email? Her cheerful expression faltered just enough for him to know she understood more than she was letting on. Of course, Dr. Pemberton. And take the mint sweets home early today, he added with a faint smile, for Millie. Mrs. Bellamy looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "I will," she said softly. Dominic walked to the lift, the black folder beneath his arm, his heartbeat steady and hard. He knew the power of companies like Bingham and Blaine. He knew what they could do to a person's reputation, career, finances, peace. One man against a giant, David against Goliath, except David had lawyers, shareholders, political contacts, and a communications team waiting in the wings. Dominic stepped into the lift and pressed the button for the ground floor. As the doors closed, he thought of Kara Minelli and of the thousands of voices no one in that boardroom wanted to hear. He did not yet know what he would do next, but he knew who he needed to meet. Dominic did not call Kara immediately. For most of that evening, he sat in his apartment with the report open on his dining table, his laptop beside it, his phone face down, and the strange awareness that he was about to step out of the life he had carefully built. He was a powerful man, at least by ordinary standards. He had money, contacts, influence, and a reputation that opened doors most people could not even approach. But he knew the backing and might of corporations like Bingham and Blaine. One man against a giant was not romance. It was risk. He needed help. More than that, he needed someone who understood the human truth behind the evidence. Someone who knew what these people had endured before their suffering was turned into graphs, complaints, and reputational exposure. He needed Kara Minelli. The next morning, just after 8, he called the number listed on her professional website. She answered on the 4th ring. Kara Minelli speaking. Dominic stood instinctively as though she had entered the room. "Dr. Minelli, my name is Dominic Pemberton. You don't know me, but I would be grateful for a few minutes of your time." There was a pause. "I'm listening." Her voice was exactly as he remembered it from the recordings and the meditations, warm, low, careful. But there was something else there now. Caution. "I have recently been asked to prepare a report for Bingham and Blaine Pharmaceuticals." The silence that followed was immediate and complete. Dominic continued before she could end the call. "It concerns Navexidone. I see. I believe the company intends to bury what I found." Another pause. This one was different. "What did you find?" Kara asked. "That the complaints are credible, that the pattern is consistent, that the harm is real." For a few seconds, he heard only the faintest sound of her breathing. "And why are you telling me this, Dr. Pemberton?" "Because your work is central to the evidence, and because I think the people affected by this drug need more than another buried report." "You work for them?" "I was hired by them." "That is not quite the same answer." "No," he said, "it isn't." There was a quietness between them that did not feel empty. Dominic could almost sense her weighing him, turning over every word, every pause, every careful admission. "I would like to meet you," he said. "In person, somewhere public. I will bring the report. You may bring whomever you wish." "And what do you want from me?" "The truth," he said. "Your truth. Their truth. The truth no one in that boardroom wants to hear." Kara did not answer at once. Then she said, "Saturday, 11 o'clock, the Winsong Hotel. There's a small meeting room off the terrace. Ask for room 4. Dominic released a breath he had not realized he was holding. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Kara said. "I haven't decided what your true motives are yet." "I wouldn't expect you to." Okay, well, let's see. Let's see whether we stand united or fall divided. Take care. And then she hung up. On her side of the call, as she walked back into the kitchen, Kara found herself humming an old Brotherhood of Man song from childhood. United we stand, divided we fall. She stopped suddenly and laughed at herself. I really must stop singing my thoughts out loud, she said to the empty room. Dominic stared at the phone for several seconds. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled almost as if he had heard her. On Saturday morning, the Windsong Hotel looked as though it had been designed for people who wanted to forget the world was difficult. It sat close to the harbour, elegant and pale against the blue-grey shimmer of the water, with wide windows, polished floors, and white orchids arranged in tall glass vases. Beyond the terrace, small boats moved across the bay like folded paper. Meeting room 4 was intimate rather than grand. A round table, 6 chairs, a sideboard with coffee and tea, and one long window overlooking the harbour. Kara was already there when Dominic arrived. She stood as he entered, and for a few moments he forgot every speech he had prepared. She was not what a corporate file could hold. Files reduce people to influence, risk, reach, profile, threat. They did not capture the alert intelligence in her eyes, the softness of her mouth, the slight tilt of her head, or the curious way she seemed both ethereal and deeply grounded at once. Dr. Minelli, he said. Please call me Kara, Dr. Pemberton. Kara, he said, as though testing the name gently. I'm Dominic. They shook hands. Her hand was warm, her face unreadable. Please, she said, gesturing to the table. Do sit. Dominic placed the black folder on the table, but did not open it immediately. Before he could stop himself, he blurted, I like your website. Kara blinked. It was not, he realized too late, the sentence with which a man should open a confidential meeting about pharmaceutical harm, corporate misconduct, and potential whistleblowing. You joined my website? She asked. Dominic felt heat rise into his face, something that had not happened in at least 20 years. Yes. Why? He could have said research. He could have said professional interest. He could have hidden behind the kind of language he had used all his life. Instead, he told her the truth. Because I wanted to hear your voice without stealing it. Kara stared at him. For a moment, all her sharp replies seemed to leave her. Well, she said at last, that may be the strangest compliment I've ever received. It was meant as an apology. Her face changed slightly. Dominic sat down opposite her. I should tell you something before I show you the report. That would be wise. Bingham and Blaine obtained recordings of some of your support calls. Kara went very still. Dominic hated himself for the flash of hurt that crossed her face before she hid it. I listened to part of one, he said, then another. I should not have done that. The recordings were not lawfully or ethically obtained, and I am sorry. Kara did not speak. I did not come here to ask you to trust me, he continued. I have not earned that. I came because I believe the report matters, and because I think you may know how to help me make sure it does not disappear. Kara folded her hands around her cup and studied him carefully. You realize what you are asking? Yes, they will come after you. They already have. They will come after me too. Dominic's expression softened. I know. Do you? He looked down at the black folder, then back at her. I know enough to understand that I do not know enough. That is one of the reasons I am here. For the first time, Kara's eyes held something other than suspicion. Open the folder, she said quietly. Dominic did. For the next 2 hours, they went through the report, line by line. Kara read quickly, marking sections with a pencil she pulled from her bag, sometimes nodding, sometimes frowning, sometimes closing her eyes as though the words had touched a place too familiar to bear. "This is accurate," she said at one point. Then, a few pages later, "This needs more context." And later still, "This sentence is too clean. It makes the suffering sound tidy. It isn't tidy." Dominic wrote down everything. Kara gave him names. Lobbyists who had been pressing quietly for years, doctors who understood withdrawal and had tried to raise awareness, researchers who had gathered relevant data, and organizations that could provide further documentation, patient accounts, and regulatory history. "You need more than my voice," she said. "There are others who have been trying to get this seen for a very long time." Dominic looked up from his notes. "Then we bring them in?" Kara's expression softened, just slightly. "Yes," she said, carefully. "Some of them have already paid a high price for speaking." When she spoke about the people she supported, her voice changed. It became even quieter, but there was force in it, compassion, indignance, frustration even. It was the sound of someone who had spent years holding the hands of people who were extremely vulnerable and unsupported. "They are not merely patients," Kara said. "They are parents, nurses, teachers, artists, engineers, grandparents, teenagers, carers, doctors, people who had lives before this happened to them. That must not be lost. Once they become cases, people stop seeing them." Dominic looked at her. "I see them," he said. Kara's pencil paused above the page. "I'm beginning to believe you do." By the time the hotel staff brought in fresh tea and a small plate of pastries, the tension between them had altered. It had not vanished, but it had changed shape. Suspicion had made room for something more careful. Respect, perhaps, and something underneath respect that neither of them intended to name. Kara reached for a pastry, then stopped. "Are these complimentary?" Dominic glanced at the tray. "I assume so." Kara gave him a look. "You assume so because you are clearly a man who has never had to check whether pastries are included." Dominic laughed before he could stop himself. It was not the controlled laugh he used at dinners and corporate receptions. It was real, and it surprised them both. "I will pay for the pastries," he said solemnly. "And the room?" "And the room." "And the trauma of having to meet you?" "That may require a separate invoice." Kara's mouth twitched. "There may be hope for you yet, Dr. Pemberton. I live in cautious optimism." "Do you?" "No," he admitted, "but I'm trying it on." She smiled then, properly, and Dominic felt the force of it somewhere he had not expected. Over the next 5 days, Meeting Room 4 became their temporary headquarters. Except for quick trips home to sleep, shower, and feed Kara's elderly cat Marmalade, they spent almost every waking hour there, surrounded by files, laptops, coffee cups, sticky notes, patient timelines, regulatory documents, and the steady, sobering weight of what they were trying to do. Dominic brought structure. Kara brought human truth. He knew how institutions protected themselves. She knew how injured people disappeared inside systems that did not want to see them. Together, they became difficult to dismiss.